And we will continue with the following panel we have in our agenda. I will now ask the Colonel César Álvarez from the Borredá Foundation, who will give us a very interesting presentation about the reflections of the Spanish airport security model. So, César, you have the floor back again. Thank you very much, Javier. Good morning and good afternoon again, depending on where you are in the planet. I am now going to try to share my presentation. I think you can see it now. When the organization asked me to prepare this presentation, they told me about reflections on the future of airport security, but I really thought that we have such great experts here, and I shouldn't be providing reflections on the future of the security model. But what I humbly would like to share is some reflections about security in general and in the airports in Spain. According to the experiences we've gained in different studies that we have created in our foundation, well, these studies, you can find them on our website, by the way. So the Borredá Foundation is a non-profit organization whose main purpose is to promote, improve, and create activities related to private and public security. We are focused on the role of the security manager because we consider it key for the Spanish model, and we have different strategic lines that we follow according to their availability. One of them is the one regarding critical infrastructures, with a symposium organized every 2 years in ports or airports. There's another strategic line, which is intelligence, where we generate different articles, and we have a master's degree on intelligence and security in private companies. And there's another field, which is training and education through different courses about several subject matters. Finally, we also conduct studies that I will now mention and draft reports about specific aspects or general interest issues or questions for the public or for the general public, and to facilitate the administration, telling them about certain trends that we have observed from our position, which is absolutely impartial and without any kind of conflict of interest. Now, if we speak about civil aviation, very quickly, we have a framework since 1944 where the ICAO was created until 2001, where the EU assumed competencies after the Twin Tower attack. And there are different regulations, more or less binding, but the EU started to have binding rules and binding regulations for its member states. So from that point in Spain, we had the air security law, the National Security Program for Civil Aviation, and in 2011, the EU promoted the Regulation 300 about civil aviation security. I will mention this regulation as the original one, and then there is a set of rules from the EU that provide a framework for the scope of security for civil aviation. In 2011, this was transposed into the national legislation, this regulation in this regulation 300. So it was transposed into national legislation, and we included the critical infrastructures. Then we have a new regulation for systems and networks transposed in Spain into the NIS law in 2018, which has had a new regulation this year. With this framework, this regulatory framework, the airport security is competence of the civil guard. They assume the responsibility for the restricted area of the airport, and the national police or the regional police having competencies for it. They cover the public areas. The airport operator, AENA usually, completes these services hiring private security services with auxiliary functions, which are also important. Let us not forget that the screening of passengers are organized by private security guards. All right, this question is important because these private security services in the airports have been a source of problems in the last few years in Spain. In 2017, during the months of July and August, there was in the Barcelona airport, there was a strike of the private security guards. And these led to some dysfunctions in the airports that, of course, have an impact on the image and on the security of the airport. We need to take into account that hiring private security services in Spain is about 4 billion euros, and airports represent 8.25% of that amount, and they provide a job to 6,000 workers. The airport operator has been reducing the margins, the profit margins, for those companies that access the contracts, and there is contracting just based on price without properly evaluating technical requirements that would be desirable, or but they just decide based on the price. And this, of course, contributes to the risk appetite of the companies that may make them incur into losses. With some of the contracts that are done with the airport manager include certain punishing clauses that I have to confess they are not very advantageous for the private security providers, because this duality between security providers, they cost negative evaluations and sanctions attached. There were also problems in managing the fees because of a bad evaluation. And there's a deficit in the availability of AENA in order to hire. Technical innovation is another important topic, and it's not always empowered with these kind of questions, because the fact that we just work based on the lowest bidder and the lowest price is a break for innovation. Well, that's one of the aspects that we could conclude from one of our studies. The internal threat is another study that was commissioned by the National Center to Protect Critical Infrastructures. And this study was about taking a look at the conditions or measures that were in place to face internal threats for critical infrastructures. We have to understand that critical infrastructures, or we consider internal threats, either those threats coming from the employees or other external people. It's true, and it's obvious that the internal threat exists. In the ICAO, in its declaration, already alerted about the insiders as a great threat because of the great danger they entail, their potential action. And in this sense, We could mention the attack of Metrojet, where an airplane crashed in St. Petersburg in October 2015. It is not necessary to have that inside the airport. There was another attack in Brussels, which told us how easy it is to intervene a terrorist group outside the airport checks.
And in our study, we'll take a look at the ICAO rules, the European Union rules, and Spain rules in Spain as an example of best practices in terms of how we check for example, the criminal background, intelligence reports often alert about other types of background, not necessarily criminal background known by law enforcement officers. They're all a great tool to make sure we can screen the people we give access to manage our infrastructure, even up to the top management. One of the more interesting studies now that has been happening every 2 years, we've been doing every 2 years, gives us this vision on how we perceive changes in security departments. Of course, we not all define the same things the same. We understand corporate security as the set of actions to protect and retrieve assets of an organization in the face of risks of any nature, any type of risk, in any type of asset. So in our latest report, March 2020, we see that the main trend considered by security departments then, the one that has greatest impact on their activity, is precisely cyber threats. Then there are other matters that have to do with some legislation, and then specific events that set a trend or a course. Integration between IT, OT, well, different matters mainly linked to the regulation. Now, in this report, the highest threat is cyber threat, followed by reputational risk, attack to industrial production systems. Well, you see what's the set of threats that are greatest concern. And here you can see that how the concern for terrorism, organized crime, internal or external fraud has decreased. There's greatest concern with reputational risks, for example. Let me tell you that this is the latest snapshot of security prior to the pandemic, because like I said, this is from February, March last year. Now, this approach, this study now, of course, would include the fear of pandemics and this type of thing, which is unfortunately so current. So precisely during the critical period of the pandemic last year, during the first lockdown, the Borredá Foundation put together different conferences online, touching upon different aspects of security and the impact that the current situation had on security. So we saw, these are some of the lessons learned following that initial crisis. Among the lessons learned, first one is the validity of the our prior work. We've planned for a lot of things in security, and they were all valid, even though we had to change our plans on the go. But whatever we had anticipated enabled us to have a methodology and knowledge that was much easier to adapt rather than creating from scratch. Another very interesting point is that, well, we were used to having contingency plans. Let's say, should this happen, we will do this or that. So this is not how we solve the problem. It's not a matter of faith in a situation. We need to foresee contingencies one after another. We need ongoing training. It's not enough with foreseeing a problem and a solution. It's this problem plus that complication plus that collateral issue, this and that. Well, that's reality. This now we know that this is how this crisis works. Companies were already undergoing a digital transformation. It hasn't been brought to a halt. Actually, it's taking up speed. The only change, if any, is that things go faster. The Borredá Foundation itself did not intend to conduct its events or research over the internet, but we quickly adapted, and in 3 months we launched what we were going to do initially in 3 years. Cybersecurity is #1 concern, and it's become a bigger concern because of remote work. Of course, this has impact on operators one way or another. More remote work, more vulnerability, greater surface of exposure, and the networks had a certain perimeter in the past, but now that needs to extend to include their employees' laptops. The economic crisis we are experiencing and will continue to experience will force us to be more efficient. We need more efficient security systems, more flexible security systems to adapt better. And then controlling people or the means available for us, made available by the technology, well, we will have to very careful monitor this dilemma between privacy and security. Now, regarding the future, what does the future await us? It's really important for security to be part of the future and to be part of it by design. Anticipating and resilience are qualities that will enable us to stay ahead of the times and continue to work with the problems come to happen. Risk management must be global. We must create collaborative models so that we all contribute to manage the risk. Intelligence is really important to use intelligence techniques and get the support of intelligence units for the security of organizations, together with a good governance model and greater awareness and training of everybody involved, everybody who has a role to play in security. Technology must be useful not as an end, but as a means to manage complex environments, as an airport is. Open platforms so that we can manage thereafter. Biometrics, video analytics are there. They're not the future, they are the present. And just like robotics, they will replace repetitive processes in the future. And if we face a digital pandemic, we will have to apply all mechanisms supported by intelligence and, as we said earlier, and crisis management, collaborating in a public-private partnership, and also private-private. We should not be competing in security. The security of the stakeholders involved should actually be the priority. I'm available to for. Well, thank you very much, César, to you and to the foundation.